So looking at here is the opportunity for Ziyen in the US domestic oil market. So what people don't actually realize is there's over 300,000 oil leases in America. So there's no other market like it in the world. The marketplace is very fragmented. So what's actually happened is, over the generations, it's actually been passed down from father to son, father to son. So if he had 3 sons, and from 40 years ago, and he had an oil lease that was 1,000 acres, he would probably pass it on to the 3 sons. So they would actually have 3 potential leases at 330 acres each. And there's nowhere else in the world that actually does this. So when you look at the likes of ExxonMobil or BP Shell, when they're coming back into America, what they're coming into is federal lands that have been made available, whether it's offshore drilling up in Alaska, but for the domestic drilling in the Midwestern America, that's essentially what's happened. So if we look at the Illinois Basin itself, so the Illinois Basin actually only produces 33,000 barrels a day. It's one of the oldest basins in America. So what you're looking at is there's 10 other markets like that in America. So essentially, why are the big oil companies not producing oil here anymore? It's not that they can't produce the oil that what we can do. The difference is they're going overseas where they can actually produce oil at a much lower rate and therefore increases their profitability. The reason they're not in the Midwest, because if you go back in the history of the leases in the Illinois Basin, if you look at the same leases that we're acquiring now, 30 years ago it was all the companies that made up ExxonMobil, Texaco, Mobil, there was Shell, there was BP, and essentially they were only drilling to around about 1,000 feet. So the leases that we're acquiring have been in the hands of the big oil companies. It's just that they do not want to deal with the farmer or the original landowner. They don't get the opportunity to make large economies of scale, and they can't produce oil at the large quantities that they can produce in countries like Iraq and overseas. So essentially the reason they pull out of the market here is not because they can't make a profit like we can, it's because they can make such a higher profit overseas. And that's sort of created the opportunity for the company. Again, at the bottom, what you've got to realize is the cost to produce a barrel of oil in the US on average was $36 a barrel. The cost to produce a barrel of oil in Saudi Arabia, you're looking at $10 a barrel. So we at Ziyen, we believe we can actually start to produce oil at less than $20 a barrel, maybe down to $14, $15, $16 a barrel with our technology. So it's still not going to be cheaper than you produce oil in Saudi Arabia, but if the oil price is at $64, $65 or $70 a barrel, there's still a huge margin for our company to make profit. It's just that we won't make the same profit as producing a barrel of oil in Saudi Arabia, and that's why the bigger companies go there, not because they can't make a profit here. So that gives you a bit of background to where we're actually coming from.